There is a strange tragedy happening all around us. It happens quietly, without violence, without noise. It happens in homes, in streets, in cities full of people moving fast, working hard, chasing goals. It happens inside of you. Most people will live their whole lives and never meet themselves. They will work, they will love, they will laugh, they will suffer, but they will never truly find the one thing that was closest to them from the very beginning, their own soul. Carl Jung saw this long before our world became loud with distraction, long before we had endless screens to fill the silence, long before we could scroll for hours and never hear our own thoughts. He knew that the greatest danger was not outside of us. It wasn't the world. It wasn't others. It wasn't even time. It was forgetting who we are. Not losing ourselves in a moment of crisis, but never even knowing we were lost. Jung wrote that every human being has a deep, hidden self, ancient whole, waiting beneath all the noise we build around it. But most people will never reach it. Not because they don't want to, but because it requires something terrifying. Silence, honesty, and the courage to face what lives in the dark corners of the mind. You see, we are born whole. As children, we move through life without masks, without personas, without needing to explain or justify or perform. But little by little, we learn to become acceptable. We build a face for the world to see. We build a version of ourselves that fits into families, fits into schools, fits into jobs, fits into expectations. And we wear that version so long, so convincingly, that we forget it was ever a mask. Jung called it the persona, a Latin word meaning mask from the ancient theatre. It is the face we show the world. But it is not who we are. And beneath that face, buried deep, waits everything we left behind. Our real fears, our forgotten dreams, our unspoken anger, our lost creativity, our wildness, our silence. Jung said it simply, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege is rare, because to meet yourself, you must be willing to lose who you thought you were. You must step away from the noise, away from the stories others told you, away from the roles you were given, away from the lists, the labels, the masks, and walk into a room that feels empty at first. But it isn't empty. It's waiting. It's always been waiting. This is the forgotten self. Not perfect, not polished, not social, but real, alive, unfolding beneath the surface of every ordinary day. Most people never find it, not because it's far away, but because they never slow down long enough to look. It begins so early we don't even notice. We put it on without thinking, without effort, without resistance. The mask. Jung called it the persona. It is the version of ourselves we create, so we can live in the world, a necessary invention, a social survival tool, a role in the theatre of life. And at first it protects us. Children learn quickly. Smile when praised, hide anger when scolded, act confident when afraid, be good, be quiet, be easy to love. The persona isn't fake, it's functional. It helps us navigate the expectations of family, friends, school, work. It smooths the edges of our inner world so we can fit into an outer one. But something happens along the way. We forget it's a mask. We begin to believe the role is who we really are. We become trapped, not by others, but by our own performance. Jung said, this is one of the great dangers of modern life, that most people live entirely inside their persona, never knowing there was anything else. They become the job. They become the status. They become the achievements. They become the image they created to survive. And the longer they wear the mask, the harder it is to take off. Because the mask is safe. It tells us what to do. It tells us who to be. It keeps the world predictable. But beneath the mask, silence, uncertainty, the self we left behind untouched, unspoken, waiting. Jung warned of this sleepwalking life. Not because the persona is evil, but because it is incomplete. The persona is only meant to be a tool, not a prison. We forget this. We polish the mask, we decorate it, we show it to the world. We attach our worth to it. But inside, a quiet fracture grows. Moments come when the mask slips. In loneliness, in loss, in exhaustion, in stillness. And suddenly, for a brief second, we catch a glimpse of something else. A voice inside, a feeling without words, a hunger for something real, something forgotten. This is the beginning. The moment when life stops being a performance and starts becoming a search. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because the self is not always what we imagined. It holds the parts of us we left behind, the parts we feared, the parts we rejected, but it also holds our freedom, because the persona is what we show the world. The self is what we show to no one, not even ourselves until we are ready. And most people never look. Not because they can't, but because the mask feels easier, safer, predictable. But safety is not life. And predictability is not truth. One day, if you are brave enough, the mask will feel too heavy, and you will begin to hear the silence beneath it. The voice calling you home, not to who the world told you to be, but to who you already are. There is a part of you that you pretend doesn't exist. A part that lives in the corners of your mind, in the moments you regret, in the thoughts you never say out loud, in the emotions you were taught to hide. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not because it is evil, not because it should be destroyed, but because it lives where the light does not reach. The shadow is everything you rejected, everything you pushed down, everything that didn't fit into your persona. Anger, fear, desire, jealousy, weakness, wildness. Not because these things are wrong, but because the world told you they were unacceptable. So you buried them. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You laughed when you wanted to cry. You stayed quiet when something inside you burned. This is how the shadow is born. Piece by piece, year after year, until there is a part of you living underground, unseen, unknown, growing stronger in silence. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Most people never do. Most people live their entire lives afraid of the shadow, running from it, denying it, projecting it onto others. We call other people selfish to avoid seeing our own selfishness. We despise arrogance because we fear the pride within us. We resent anger because we cannot face our own rage. This is why we judge so quickly, why we blame so easily, why we fear certain people because they reflect the shadow we refuse to see. But the shadow does not disappear when ignored. It waits. It seeps through dreams. It rises in moments of crisis. It speaks when we are tired or lost or pushed to our edge. And if we never face it, it controls us from the dark. Jung knew that the shadow is not your enemy. It is your power, your energy, your forgotten self. It is the key to wholeness. Because you cannot love yourself if you only love half of who you are. You cannot be free if you are running from your own reflection. The work of meeting the shadow is not easy. It asks everything of you. Honesty, humility, courage. It asks you to sit in silence with what you fear most and not look away. To see your anger and understand where it comes from. To see your fear and hold it with compassion. To see your pain and stop numbing it. This is the path most people will never take. Not because it is hidden, but because it is hard. Because it requires standing naked before yourself, without judgment, without escape, and saying, "This is me, all of me, not perfect, not polished, not ready for display, but real, alive, and whole." The shadow is not your darkness. It is your depth. It is the doorway to everything real, and the beginning of becoming fully who you are. It's not that people don't want to find themselves. Most believe they do. They read the books. They search for meaning. They fill notebooks with goals and dreams. They chase experiences that promise transformation. But beneath all of it, beneath the noise, beneath the effort, most people are running. Not toward themselves, but away. Away from the stillness, away from the silence, away from the terrifying realization that nothing outside of them will complete them. Carl Jung saw it clearly. People will do almost anything to avoid meeting themselves. They will work themselves to exhaustion. They will fill every hour with distraction. They will chase validation like water in the desert. They will curate perfect images for others to see. They will drown in comfort, just to avoid the quiet. Because in that quiet, there is no mask left to wear. There is no persona. There is only you. And for most people, that is unbearable. Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Why? Because the soul does not speak the language of performance. It doesn't care about your achievements. It doesn't care about your image. It doesn't care how well you followed the script. The soul waits for truth. Raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable. And this is what most people have never prepared for. They were told life was about becoming better, more productive, more successful, more impressive. But the path to yourself is not upward. It's downward. Not higher, but deeper. Not climbing to some ideal self, but descending into the forgotten places within. And descent is frightening. Jung knew it. That's why people avoid solitude. Why they fear being alone for too long. Why they fill every gap with noise, music, podcasts, notifications, anything but stillness. Because in stillness, the shadow appears. and with it questions we cannot answer quickly. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I believe when no one tells me what to think? What do I feel when I stop numbing myself? Most people never go there, not because they are weak, but because they have never been taught how. Our world rewards speed, not depth. Efficiency, not reflection. Distraction, not presence. And so the greatest journey of all, the inner journey, becomes the rarest. Jung believed that the person who turns inward is already different, already awakening, because they are willing to stand in the one place most fear to enter, themselves, fully, without a mask, without a map, without a script, just the silent ancient presence of their own being, waiting to be remembered. Finding yourself is not a sunrise. It is not a golden moment of sudden clarity. It is not a perfect morning with coffee, journals, and motivation. It is not a gentle unfolding. It is a descent. Carl Jung knew this intimately, not from theory, but from experience. To meet the self is to go downward, into the places most people avoid, into the unconscious, into the mythic underworld of the psyche. This journey is not glamorous. It is not always beautiful. It is dark. It is painful. It is disorienting. But it is real, and more than anything, it is necessary. In every ancient myth, the hero descends before they rise. They leave the world of appearances, the world of surface identity. They enter the cave, the forest, the belly of the beast. And in that place they meet what they have always feared. Jung saw these myths not as fantasy, but as maps of the inner world. He called this process individuation, the becoming of a whole human being, not perfect, not enlightened, but integrated, alive, connected to every part of the self, both light and shadow. But to reach that wholeness, you must go down. You must face the forgotten, the rejected, the feared. And this descent begins when life breaks the illusion. When the persona can no longer hold you, when success feels empty, when relationships become mirrors you can't ignore, when the things you thought would complete you fall apart in your hands. It can feel like failure, but it's not. It's the call, the ancient invitation whispered from the depths. Come back, not to the surface, but to the center, to the part of you that was never lost, only buried. This journey cannot be forced, it cannot be scheduled, it cannot be optimized. It demands surrender. It asks you to let go of who you think you are, to walk through the fear of not knowing, to sit in the dark until your eyes adjust, until the silence begins to speak. Because down here, language changes. The rational mind loses power. Symbols rise. Dreams become teachers. Emotions become guides. You realize you were never alone, only disconnected. And in this descent, something ancient awakens. A remembering, a reconnection, a return. This is the work most people avoid, not because it is hidden, but because it cannot be controlled. But if you stay, if you allow the descent, something happens. You begin to feel whole again, not because the world outside is fixed, but because the world inside is no longer divided. You no longer reject parts of yourself. You no longer wear a mask for every situation. You no longer run from the feelings that once scared you. You are no longer climbing. You are arriving. And in that arrival, in that descent, You find the beginning of what it means to truly know yourself. Not as an idea, not as a label, but as a presence. Quiet, strong, unshakable. Your true self not found at the top of some imagined mountain, but in the sacred depths you were taught to fear. There comes a moment quiet, small, often unnoticed, when you finally stop running. When the noise grows tired of itself, when the distractions lose their grip, when the masks feel heavier than your own skin, and you sit there alone with yourself. Not the self you show to the world, not the self you hoped to become, but the real one. The one you've avoided for years. Carl Jung called this the confrontation with the self, the meeting with everything you are and everything you've hidden. This moment is not glamorous. It's not beautiful in the way people imagine transformation. It's raw, it's humbling, it's fragile. Because when you finally look at yourself fully without avoidance, you see everything. You see the parts you're proud of, your kindness, your strength, your dreams. But you also see the parts you buried, your anger, your envy, your need for control, your fear of being unloved, your exhaustion from performing. And perhaps hardest of all, you see the wounds. The moments that shaped you when no one noticed, the loneliness you carried silently, the stories you told yourself just to survive. This is why most people never look, because they think meeting themselves will feel like love. But first, it feels like grief. Grief for who you pretended to be, grief for the time you lost avoiding your truth, grief for the masks you wore so long they became hard to remove. But grief is not the end. Grief is the beginning of freedom. Because when you stop running from yourself, you stop needing to lie. You stop needing to impress. You stop needing to control every detail of life. You stop needing the world to see you a certain way. You begin to exist not as an idea, but as presence. Real, unfiltered, whole. Jung wrote that this is the only path to true healing. Not perfection, not endless self-improvement, not becoming better in the eyes of others, but becoming real. And when you become real, something extraordinary happens. You stop projecting. You stop blaming others for your wounds. You stop needing the world to fix what only you can face. You begin to hold yourself with kindness, the kind of kindness that does not excuse your shadows, but understands them. You begin to understand other people too, their masks, their fears, their wounds, because you have seen your own. And so your relationships change, your inner life softens, your presence deepens. You move slower not because you are weak, but because you no longer need to rush away from yourself. You become the one place you can finally rest. Not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. And the world around you feels different too. Not because it changed, but because you did. You are no longer a stranger to yourself. You are home. Carl Jung never told people to become perfect. He never promised enlightenment. He never spoke of a final version of the self, flawless, untouchable, completed like a project. He spoke of something far older, far deeper, far more human. Wholeness. Not the polished self, not the curated self, but the real one. A person who has met every part of themselves and stayed. a person who carries both light and shadow without fear, a person who no longer divides life into good and bad, right and wrong, acceptable and forbidden, but sees everything as part of the great pattern of being alive. Jung wrote, "I would rather be whole than good." Because goodness without wholeness is fragile. It depends on conditions. It depends on being seen, being praised, being validated. But wholeness, true wholeness, depends on nothing outside of you. It comes from meeting yourself so completely that you no longer fear your own depths. It comes from understanding that you are not here to impress the world. You are here to live fully, to feel everything, to carry your wounds with grace, to own your strength without arrogance, to stand with your shadows not against them. This is why most people never find themselves. Because the search is not upward towards some perfect ideal. The search is inward, downward, into the places we avoid, into the feelings we suppress, into the dreams we abandon, into the silence we never enter. Most people never find themselves, not because they can't, but because the path is harder than they imagined. It is not the path of becoming better. It is the path of becoming real. And that path never truly ends. You don't arrive at yourself once. You arrive again and again, in new seasons, in new challenges, in new losses, in new loves. Finding yourself is not a destination. It is a practice, a returning, a remembering, a gentle willingness to sit with what is without judgment, to look at your reflection, not the persona, but the soul beneath it, and say, "I see you, not perfect, but whole." And in that wholeness, life becomes different, not easier, not without pain, not without darkness, but honest, clear, alive. This is the work Jung left for us. Not a map, not a rule book, but a quiet invitation. Stop running. Stop pretending. Stop chasing the self outside of you and turn inward. Turn toward the forgotten. Turn toward the shadow. Turn toward the one person you were always meant to find. Yourself. As you are. As you were. As you always will be. Waiting. Patient. Unmoving. Home.